Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Holly Grace, and in today's episode we are going to be taking cheap, ugly, prefabricated art pieces and we're going to be turning them into stunning farmhouse signs. I'm going to be making these over. I have two of them here that are exactly the same. So I'm going to be turning these into his and hers matching signs for my master bedroom. So let's jump right into the episode. Alright guys, so these are the fronts of the art, and these are just cheap pieces of art. I think my mom actually picked these up from an auction. She probably paid like 99 cents each for them or something. But you can find a lot of art like this at thrift stores, secondhand stores, so you can get your hands on something like this, I am sure. Now, we are actually going to be using the back side, so it doesn't matter what this side looks like because we're going to be using the insides of these art pieces. So this side here. So I'm going to flip these over and I'm just going to start with one. So we'll take one away and we're going to work with just one at a time here. So we'll start with this one here. Now what we want to do first is we want to remove any stickers or anything like that so that our piece is free from stickers. And I just have my Ryobi battery operated sander and I'm going to start by sanding the edges here. Okay, now that our sanding is done, I want to show you guys how I left the edges here. So you'll see that I left a little bit of the black edging, and I've done that on purpose because we're going to create a nice weathered rustic effect on this frame. Leaving that little black color behind helps us achieve that weathered look. So we're going to start by painting the frame. Don't worry about the inside yet, we're going to start with the frame. And the reason why we're doing the frame first instead of this part is that way if we drip any paint or any stain on the inside part of the frame, it doesn't matter. So the backdrop is going to be our last step, okay? So the first thing we're going to start with is I'm going to use this Vintage Effect wash from Decor. Now this is a paint that acts like a stain, but since we're painting on MDF, which is medium density fiberboard, it kind of just soaks in the paint. So we have to create that stained look, that stained weather effect look ourselves, okay, with paint, because this isn't gonna look like stain on MDF. See how it just soaks into the MDF? So normally what you would do with this is you would rub it on just like a stain and then you would wipe it off. But given that it soaks in, there's not really much to wipe off. So this is going to be our base layer here, and I'm just going to go all the way around the frame, rubbing it on with a foam brush, and then wiping it clean, wiping it with a cloth. Now we also want to make sure that we do the inside of the frame as well. And again, you'll see here that I'm getting it on the background part. And this is precisely why we do the background part last. Because I don't want to have to worry about not being able to rub paint on there. Now you'll also notice in here where they've glued the back piece to the frame, we have some glue in here, and the Vintage Effect wash isn't covering that glue because it's a different type of material, but we're going to fix that up when we bring in some paint, okay? So don't worry about if you're working on a frame like this and you have those spots with the glue, don't worry about that the Vintage Effect wash isn't covering that. Now we also want to do the outside portion of the frame as well. So we're going to take a little bit of Vintage Effect wash here and do this as well. So again, just rubbing it on and then wiping it off. All right, now the next step is we're going to take some of this color stain, and this is from Decor as well. and this is in the shade Ash Gray. We're gonna put a layer of this over top of our Vintage Effect wash, okay? Now, when I put this color stain on, I'm just going to brush it on, and I'm not gonna rub it in because, again, we're working on MDF here, not wood. So if I rub it in, it's just gonna mesh with the brown, okay? We just want that nice layer of nice weathered gray look over top of the brown. And this is how we're gonna create our different depth and dimension here with these different colors. Now, for the outside as well, I'll show you guys here. I'm just gonna lightly brush over without rubbing it in too much. After my color stain has dried, I'm going to take a little bit of this acrylic paint, and this is the shade Bleached Sand. So this is just straightforward acrylic paint from Decor in the shade Bleached Sand. And then I'm gonna take a stenciling brush here, and this is their number 12. And I like this brush because it's nice and stiff, and we're gonna rough this up a little bit. So we're gonna take a little bit of the bleached sand on our brush, and we're gonna dab it off. We don't want a lot of paint on our brush. So make sure you dab most of it off. And then we're gonna take our brush, and we're just gonna go along the edging, just ever so lightly, dry brushing it on into spots, okay? You don't want to paint it on. We're not painting here, we're dry brushing. Dip your stencil brush in the paint. Make sure you get the majority of it off before you apply the brush to your piece. And you're gonna go around the frame, and you can go heavier and lighter or lighter in certain spots to give a true rustic looking effect. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the edge. Now I'm gonna go a little bit heavier there in the middle, and then I'm gonna work my way out to the edges, getting lighter as I go. And then you can see that we get that nice weathered, realistic look. Don't worry about perfection when you're doing this, because if you're trying to be too perfect, that's when it's gonna look too prefabricated. But if you don't worry about perfection, you'll end up with that really rustic, realistic look. So basically, my friends, throw perfection out the window. Don't even think about it. All right, you guys, so now the inside part is a little bit different, all right? We need to put a primer down because it is dark and we wanna lighten it up, so I don't wanna waste too much white paint. So I'm gonna use this Bullseye 123 primer, and we're gonna do a layer of that. Now, I don't want you guys to worry too much about the corners or the edges or taping or anything, because I'm gonna show you. So I'm gonna start with this edge here, okay? And I'm gonna put my primer on, and see how I'm going up onto the edge there? It's not that big of a deal, because what we can do is we can wipe that away with our foam brush, but we can also go back in with our big stencil brush, and we can work that into the rustic weathered effect, okay? So don't worry too much about with the primer. Don't worry about if you go up onto the edging of the frame like that, because it actually works out in our favor here. So we're gonna continue going along like this until we've done all the edging here with our primer. And again, switching back and forth between the foam brush and our stencil brush and working that white primer into our weathered effect. And then to fill in the larger portion of my background here, I just use a little roller. Alright, now that our layer of primer has dried, we're going to give it a coat of white paint. And I'm just using a Beauty Tone flat interior acrylic paint for this. All right, so our first coat of the white is dry. Now we're gonna use foam pouncer, and why I'm gonna use the foam pouncer for the second coat is I don't want brush strokes. So in order to eliminate the brush strokes, we are going to use this foam pouncer here. So I just dab it in the paint and then I pounce some off onto my work surface, and then you can see here that when we pounce on the paint, we are eliminating any kind of brush strokes. And this will give us a nice canvas-like finish. Alright guys, so I let my sign dry overnight. Now this white backdrop is all dry, so we can go ahead and stencil on a design. So I'm going to be using my Cricut Maker here to cut out a stencil. So I am loading my blue stencil film on my standard grip mat, and then I'm using a brayer to smooth it out and get rid of all the air bubbles so my blade doesn't catch. And then we're going to slide it into our Cricut cutting machine, and the machine is going to cut out our design. If you guys really end up falling in love with these signs, I do have this design cut file available for sale on my website, hollygrace.ca, on the shop tab, and I've just linked that as well in the description on this video. Once our design is done being cut, we just weed out the areas that we don't want. Now we're stenciling, so I'm actually getting rid of the letters and keeping the blue stencil film portion of my design. Then we're going to lay our design out on our signs here, just line it up, and I'm going to use my transfer tape here, place it over my design, and then I'm going to take a smoothing tool and I'm going to smooth the transfer tape onto the design, making sure that I get out any air bubbles and that my design is really stuck on very well. Carefully removing the blue stencil film from the backing, and then we're going to line it up on our art piece and smooth it down. Now you want to make sure you smooth it really well before you take off the transfer tape. We don't want any air bubbles in here. We want a nice clean stencil. I'm going to take some black acrylic paint, and using a foam brush, I'm going to dab it on over top of my design. Make sure you dab rather than brush. This will help eliminate bleeding. Once we've covered the whole design in paint, we can remove the blue stencil film very carefully and then use a weeding picking tool to get the little areas in between the letters. I love how these signs turned out, and I can't believe that they're just cheap pieces of prefabricated art. Now I have some stunning farmhouse signs to display in my home. I took these pieces home, set them up in my bedroom, and they just fit so perfectly in here. Signs are from my favorite novel, Anne of Green Gables, so I always like to pick things in my decor that actually mean something to me. So when you're designing and doing things for your home, I highly encourage you to incorporate little pieces that actually mean something to you or that you actually really love. So I hope this inspires you to get creative and take cheap pieces of art and turn them into something unique and different. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on another video. Bye.